In the game you're about to see, Alexander Alekhine, the fourth world champion, was playing with the white pieces in this position, and he found a way to force black to lose their queen. If you would like to pause and try to figure out how he did that, go ahead and take a second. If you had a chance to look at that, we're going to look at this position in depth, as well as the moves leading up to this position and how he worked his magic to ultimately win the game. Now, before we jump into this game, I do want to make a really big announcement. In 10 days from now, my brand new course, Breaking 1500, is going live. It's only going to be open for a few days so that I can really focus on the students who are inside once registration closes. Okay, so July 15th is the day. It'll be open for 5 days. And if you're under 1500, then this course is for you. I think between 800 and 1200 is kind of the sweet spot where you're going to probably benefit the most, the quickest, but really anyone under 1500 is going to benefit tremendously from this. I've spent a lot of time putting this together. I'm really, really excited. I don't usually get so excited about my courses, but this one is special. So stay tuned. I'll be telling you more information as we get a little bit closer, but definitely mark your calendars. July 15th is when that goes live. All right, let's get back to the game and see how Alexander Alekhine worked his magic to lead up to this position right here. All right, here we go. So it's e4, e5, and as a reminder, this is game number 15 from the book Logical Chess Move by Move, which we've been going through on the channel here. And he decides to just simply go into a Ruy Lopez. So white attacks the pawn, black defends the pawn, and he plays the move bishop to b5. So there's really two main moves here that you see most of the time, bishop c4 or bishop b5. Bishop c4 is the Italian game. You have the fried liver attack, Evans Gambit, all these other different openings that come out of that. But the Ruy Lopez is very common. And as we've said previously in the series, this is not really an attempt to win the pawn on e5, even though it looks like maybe that's what white wants to do. We've talked about this before. Queen to d4 is a fork, and black gets their pawn back after you move the knight somewhere. And actually, black is the one who has the better position because the bishop pair, they're going to be able to castle, put the rooks on the center, and really black has no problems. Okay, so why do you even put the bishop there then? Well, like I mentioned before, it's to have long-term pressure, and maybe at some point when you feel like it's the right time, you could take the pawn on e5, okay? So let's keep going. So knight to f6 is played. Now, this is called the Berlin defense. Now, the Berlin defense is a very interesting option for black against the Ruy Lopez. And in the year, I believe it was about 2000, when Vladimir Kramnik was trying to beat Garry Kasparov in the World Championship, Kramnik played the Berlin defense a lot. And he had some very good success with it. I think he had a lot of draws. And when you're playing at the very top level in the World Championship, a good strategy is to try to win with white and draw with black. And so the fact that he was able to get a lot of draws by playing this was a good thing, okay? And it's been analyzed a lot since then. And we're going to talk more about this as we go forward. There's a lot of things about it that people just kind of understand now that would not have been understood at the time this game was played. Okay, this game was played in 1936, and this person was, I don't know what their rating was, but this was a simul. So Alekhine was playing against multiple people at the same time, and so you could assume his opponent probably wasn't super strong, although they did play some nice moves in this game, so they weren't like a complete beginner. Anyway, let's keep going. So Alekhine castles. Now, the first thing that should jump out at you is the pawn on e4 is undefended, and he's just ignoring it. Why is he doing that? Well, you have to understand when you play these e4, e5 openings, a lot of times the person who castles first has the advantage, because if something like this ever happens, you could slide the rook over, and now the other person has to be very careful, right? However, in this particular position, this is actually the best move, taking the pawn. And part of it has to do with the fact that there's still an e-pawn blocking the rook from getting to the king, so that's one thing. And there's also this move bishop to e7. You can always play bishop e7 to block off the rook if you need to, and then you can simply castle right away, and usually you're going to be okay as black. Now, if you don't have those things going for you, you have to be really careful playing a move like this, okay? So just please understand the difference there and why in this case it's okay for black to take that pawn, all right? So Alekhine actually chooses a different move, d4, which is also very common here, to strike at the center, and it's kind of indirectly putting pressure on the e-file, because if you imagine if black were to take this, well, now rook to e1 becomes a more powerful move, and you have to be more careful here as black. Okay, it's not the end of the world because they do have d5, which can defend, but it gets pretty tricky. So black decides to play knight to d6, and this is one of the main moves here that you can play in the Berlin. He's attacking the bishop, and Alekhine does something very interesting here. D takes e5, and what you will notice is the bishop is undefended. There is nothing defending the bishop. He's literally just saying, go ahead, take my bishop. Now, the question for you guys who haven't already read the book, why would he do that? Why would he allow his bishop to simply be captured for free? All right, well, if you had a chance to think about that, the answer is that after the knight takes it, which is what was played in the game, there's the move a4. And if you look carefully, the knight is actually trapped. You can't go there, you can't go there. If you go here, it's going to get captured. If you go here, it's going to get captured. If you go here or here, it's going to get captured. Okay, so the knight is trapped, so he's going to get his piece back. And he also was able to capture this e5 pawn and gain some space in the center. So that's kind of what's going on here. Now, this move, a4, or actually this line where you play d takes e5 and allow them to take and then play e4, this line is not played very much at the top level unless you just want to draw. Okay, there have been many top level games that go like this. Knight comes in, takes, 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 and after d5, black has a very nice equal position, so white tries to open things up. Queen takes d6, and many grandmaster games will end in a draw like this. Check, back to d6, back to d6, check, and the game is just a draw. Okay, so if you play this, you kind of have to be okay with the draw. Now, you might be wondering, well, why can't you play something like rook to e1 check? Black's just going to play bishop e6. And actually, black has a very solid position. There's not really much here for white to do. Black is totally fine. Okay, so because of that, a lot of strong players nowadays will not play this line as white because they know it's probably going to end in a draw unless you want to draw as white, right? But at the time this game was played, like I mentioned, this was a long time ago, not only did I don't think they knew that, but also his opponent was not like a grandmaster. So there's also that. Okay, so let's keep going. So a4 was played, and instead of playing the best move here for black, they played knight to d6. Now, the idea makes sense. You're hoping that after the pawn takes, you now recapture and you've gotten rid of the e pawn. So you essentially win a pawn, right, by doing it that way. But what's the problem? That's right, the e-file is totally open. So you have to constantly be on the lookout for moves like rook to e1 check. Now, believe it or not, Alekhine doesn't play rook to e1 check right away. And the reason is because, yes, it's a check, but the bishop can just block. And yes, you could attack it again because it's pinned, but then black's going to simply castle. And they actually have it defended enough times, they can just recapture. They still have the extra pawn. You don't really have a clear attack. Black is actually slightly better, okay? So that's why Alekhine decided, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to play a different move instead. What do you guys think he played? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight to g5. And he's kind of breaking an opening principle of don't move the same piece multiple times in the opening, right? He's leaving his other pieces undeveloped, and he's doing this. Why would he do that? Well, he actually sees what's going to happen in the next couple of moves. He sees what this is leading up to. And so that is why he's breaking the rule. And you have to understand this. The top players, they know the principles, and then they know the exceptions and the reasons to break them. That's what we're seeing here, okay? And one point of this is if black tries to castle, he has a very nice follow-up. If you would like to pause, what do you think he can play? Well, the move is queen to d3. And queen to d3 because it threatens checkmate. Now, you could go to h5, but the thing about h5 is now black's going to play h6. And h6 not only stops your checkmate, it also attacks your knight. Now you have to go on the defensive, and black is actually pretty happy with their position. The game goes on, and they're doing okay. When you play queen to d3, they can't play h6 anymore. You simply just go in for checkmate. So now if they want to stop the checkmate, they have to either play f5 or g6, right? If they play f5, we have a very nice follow-up if you want to pause. Well, hopefully you noticed queen to d5 check, taking advantage of this diagonal that was just opened up. And after the king moves, you have knight to f7 check, which is a fork, and it's going to force black to give up their rook, and white's pretty happy with the position. Okay, so going back to this position after queen d3, the only real move here for black, is g6. You have to play g6. Yes, you stop the checkmate, but you've created these massive weaknesses along the dark squares, and white's going to probably be able to take advantage of that over the next couple of moves. Okay, remember, when you move the pawns in front of your king, it creates weaknesses. Usually it's not a good decision. So that's kind of the idea. He's sort of in an indirect way stopping black from castling, okay? And saving this move for later when it might be more powerful, all right? So knight to g5. Black plays bishop e7, which is a pretty good idea, right? You're blocking off the rook, you're attacking the knight, and you're getting ready to move this pawn forward, which I should have mentioned earlier, but this was one of the major drawbacks. Let me just backtrack for a second here. This was one of the major drawbacks of this bishop d6 move. The pawn on d7 is blocked, which means this guy can't come out, which means this guy can't come out. All the pieces are kind of bottled up because of the bishop on d6. So that was another reason why it wasn't really worth it to take that pawn earlier. But now black is saying, look, I'm going to fix that problem. Now I can move this forward, get my bishop out. I'm threatening here, so I'm gaining a tempo. It looks like a pretty good move. However, what did Alekhine play next? Well, the move is queen to h5. And again, he's kind of breaking the opening principles of don't bring out your queen too early. You know, we already talked about moving the same piece twice. He's not developing quickly. It's kind of weird, right? But why? He sees that there are specific weaknesses. And in the book, the author mentioned something that I thought was really good. After this move, queen h5, he said, moves are good or bad by one standard only, their effect on the position at hand. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about, like, yes, we have these general rules and principles, but there are always exceptions. And that's what Alekhine is noticing, that this is an exception. This is a time when this threat is going to cause some serious problems for black. Okay, so let's talk about this. Obviously, you can't castle, right, to defend, because then the h7 pawn is weak and you simply get checkmated. The other thing that maybe you might consider would be taking the knight, but you can't do that because when white recaptures, the queen is actually trapped. Okay, the queen is trapped. You can't play f6 because it's pinned. You have to play knight e7, and now white has a nice follow-up here. That's correct. Rook to e1. It attacks the knight, and black has no way to defend this. You're simply going to take it the next move, and the queen is still trapped. Again, you can't play this. It's just a mess for black. If you try to castle, you get forked, and black's in trouble. Now, there's one interesting thing here that you do need to notice. After rook to e8, you can't take the queen, okay? You can't take the queen or you will get back rank checkmated. So you have to watch out for that, but you could simply play a move like queen g5 or queen e2, dealing with the threat that way. The queen is still actually trapped and you're in good shape. The other way black could have done this would be queen to e8. But again, all you have to do is deal with the threat here. So for example, knight c3, defending the back rank checkmate, and there's still going to be a piece trapped. You take it next move. Okay, so either way, it's a good position for white. So now what you'll notice is that on queen h5, if you can't castle and you can't take the knight, there's not a lot of options. You could try knight e5. I don't think that's a good move. I don't remember if it was mentioned in the book, but rook e1 just simply attacking it, and black's in big trouble because if you try to defend, there's going to be this sacrifice, and then the queen's going to jump in. Okay, so the only real move here for black was, g6, which is what was played. Okay, so Alekhine kind of continues to be annoying here with his moves and plays the move queen h6. Now, why is this such an annoying move? Well, two things. Number one, he's threatening to kind of just invade and start attacking all these different things at the same time. But he's also stopping black from castling. Remember, you can't castle through a check. Okay, if your king lands on a square on the way to castling, you can't do it, right? So that's good for Alekhine because he knows the king is going to be there. He can now attack with the rook and it's not going to be able to escape. Okay, so queen h6, very nice move. And so black plays bishop to f8, attacking the queen. And now he goes rook to e1 check. Remember, saving that move until a better time, right? Earlier he could have played it, but it wasn't really going to lead to much. So sometimes when you have those good features in the position, you just want to wait just a few moves until the right moment. That's what he did here. Okay, rook to e1 check now is very, very powerful. So, for example, if you go back with the bishop, well, then obviously it allows what I just said. The queen is going to come in and invade. Then the knight can capture. And there's actually a smothered checkmate here at being threatened, for example, something like this. That's checkmate because the bishop can't take, okay? And black's position is just a total mess. So knight to e7 is what was played, blocking with the knight. Now, what do you guys think Alekhine played here? All right, so if you had a chance to look at that, this is kind of an important moment in the position because if you look at a first glance, it's like, okay, so black has dealt with this threat. My queen is under attack. I kind of have to move my queen. And it seems like maybe white wasted their time, right? And I think a lot of people in this position would play a move like queen to h4. And then what's going to happen is something like this. Bishop g7, you develop a piece. d5, you develop a piece. c6, you bring the rook over. Black plays h6, and all of a sudden, black is actually fine. Even though you didn't really do anything wrong, you missed the key feature of the position, and you missed the opportunity to really take advantage of what was going on. So this is what separates the grandmasters and the world champions from the rest of us, right? The ability to see these ideas quickly and then play them. So with that being said, that was a major clue. What do you think Alekhine played? He didn't move his queen. The move was knight to e4. Now, how did he come up with this move? If you look at this position, you say, okay, what are the weaknesses in black's position? Well, the king is in the center. That's one. Hasn't castled. And two, this g6 pawn has been moved forward, which means what? This square is a weakness. Okay, so how do we take advantage of that? Well, knight to e4 threatens checkmate. Now, some of you might be thinking, but Nelson, if the bishop takes, it's no longer checkmate because the king can escape. However, don't forget about this guy. It is checkmate, and that's a beautiful checkmate with the knight and the bishop. So you had to see that little tactic to know that knight to e4 was even an option because your queen actually couldn't be captured, okay? But what this does is it increases the pressure. It keeps the attack going rather than going back here, just simply retreating and giving the momentum back to black. And you see this a lot in chess. When you have the momentum, you have to keep going. You have to keep finding those really powerful moves. And this is why chess is hard, because a move like knight to e4 is not a move that I think a lot of people watching this video would find, right? So I hope that makes sense. Let's keep going. So black plays f5, and the idea is they're trying to give their king somewhere to run to. You don't have a lot of options, because if you move the knight somewhere, you unleash the rook, and that's actually going to be just double check and checkmate, okay? King can't move. You can't move the knight. We already talked about why you can't take the queen. Moving the pawn to give it an escape here doesn't help. It's still checkmate, right? There's really not a lot of options for black. So they try to move f5, giving the king an escape square here, because you can't go knight d6 or it just gets captured. Okay, so it's a good try. But Alekhine continues to attack, knight to f6 check. And now the king can no longer castle. Okay, he's completely removed castling rights. He knows where the king is going to be, and he's going to continue attacking it. So now he plays queen h4. There's really no other tactics or other moves. But by throwing in that little, maneuver, look at the difference in the position, right? It's not very good for black because of where the king is now. So very, very important that he did that before he retreated the queen. Okay? Let me see if there's anything else I was going to mention here. So black plays bishop g7, obviously threatening just to take the knight. And Alekhine continues bishop to g5. So he develops and defends. Always a good idea when you can accomplish multiple things. Usually you should do that. Black plays h6, trying to kick the bishop out of here. And now we have kind of a critical moment. Okay, and this is where Alekhine starts off a very nice combination. If you want to pause, what do you think it is? You got a chance to look at that. So what's the weakness in the position? It's a king on f7 primarily, right? That's not really where you want your king to be. So how does he take advantage of that? Well, queen to c4 check, right? Again, not just dealing with the threat, but going for something stronger and attacking the black king. Now, in the game, black decided to play king to f8, just retreating. The reason is because if you play d5, white's going to take, and this discovered check is extremely powerful. Remember, a discovered check means you can move your piece wherever you want, and then you unleash another piece, which in this case is the queen, delivering check. You can do all kinds of crazy things like go here and then take a rook for free, maybe even take this for free, like whatever you want. It's very, very dangerous. So black needs to try to deal with that. The problem is that if they take with the knight, well, you lose your queen, okay? And if you take with the queen, you lose your queen anyway because we throw in this in-between move and then we take the queen. So black's position is a total mess. You can't really escape this because if you try to go here, then the bishop can take is one option. If you try to go here, then the rook can take, and you're just a mess, okay? So d5 really wasn't an option for black, so that's why they decided king to f8. Now, what do you think Alekhine played next? All right, so again, he's just following through with this idea of, I have the momentum, I need to keep the attack going. How do I do that? And at first glance, it might seem like, well, everything's kind of defended. I mean, I'm not going there, checkmate. I'm not going to take this. What can I do? Actually, maybe you could take that, by the way. But he decides to take advantage of it a different way. So here's how you would come up with this move. Look at all the things that are weaknesses in your opponent's position. So we've already talked about the king, but what else is there? Well, the knight on e7 is attacked. And if I could somehow have my bishop to be able to take that, that would be really good, right? So a move like, for example, knight h7 check would be a very powerful move because if they take, boom, you get the queen. Okay, that's actually a top stockfish move. But Alekhine takes advantage of it a different way by sacrificing the rook first. But he's looking at the same things in the position. He's just taking advantage of it in a different way. Okay, and his idea is that after the queen takes, what is he going to do? Knight to h7 check. So it was the same idea of knight h7. He just switched the order, but either way, he's winning the queen. Okay, so that's what happened. Black captured. He takes the queen, and black recaptures. Now, black decided to play on, because if you look carefully, rook for rook, bishop for knight, queen for a rook, a bishop, and a pawn. Which, if you do the math, queen is 9 points, rook is 5, bishop's 3, pawn is 1. That's 9 points as well. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The problem for black is the king, and these pieces are not developed. Okay, you add that to the equation, and it's really bad for black. That's why. So, and also, you can't hold on to all your pawns. This is about to fall. There's a fork being threatened back here. Lots of issues that black has to deal with. Okay, but I think it's still important that you can see how this game finished out, because a lot of players will get into a position like this and then just mess it up, right? They're just like, well, I don't really know how to win, even though I'm ahead, and they'll blunder the queen. They just run out of time, whatever. So watch his technique as he finishes out the game. There's a lot to be learned here, okay? So let's keep going here. Let me see if I wrote down anything else. I don't think there was too much. Oh, there's one more. Yeah, important note. So let's keep going. So he takes the pawn. Obviously, that's a good starting point. Grab a free pawn. This probably would have been a little bit stronger. Just forking the pieces, it's very difficult for black to deal with that. I think you have to just choose which one you're going to give up. So, like, for example, go here, and then there's a line. Let me see. Wasn't there a line here I was going to show? Yeah, this line. The queen is actually temporarily trapped, okay? However, he's able to bring the rook over, sacrifice it. Now the queen escapes, and it's still a great position for Alekhine. So that was a little bit more of a tricky line. Like I said, this was a simul. Maybe that's why he wanted to avoid that and decided instead to just grab the pawn. Bishop takes here, simply sidesteps the attack with his rook. Bishop goes back, and he plays c4. Very nice idea. Remember, rooks not only attack along the files, they also can slide across, and he's just clearing the way so that the rook can come over here and attack this way. Okay? King gets out of the way. Rook to e2. Rook goes back, and here he plays a very nice move. Queen to d6. Now, why is queen to d6 such a nice move? I mentioned it earlier in the game. When the bishop went to d6, it blocked the pawn. And the pawn was stuck, which meant the bishop was stuck, which meant the rook was stuck, right? Which is part of the reason why black's position is not very good, because these pieces are stuck. These pieces were in the game, it would be a different story. So rather than allowing this guy to move, he says, I'm just going to put my queen there, keep that guy from moving, which means these are going to be stuck, makes my life super easy, okay? Very, very subtle thing, but a good idea to remember. These central pawns, the D and the E pawns, they need to be moved forward. So if you can blockade those, it keeps the bishops locked in, keeps the rooks locked in. It's very, very powerful. A5 was played, and now he plays another nice move, knight to c3. Now, what do you notice about that move right away? Or hopefully you notice? There's nothing defending the knight. Okay, we have a world champion here blundering his knight, right? Why is he blundering the knight? Well, hopefully you noticed it leads to rook e7 check, which then leads to a checkmate. That's a discovered check, okay, because the queen, and then after this, you simply take and checkmate. So he didn't blunder the knight. Obviously, he saw that there was going to be checkmate, so that's why he moved there. This is a good habit to get into. You look at the position, you say, okay, I don't have any immediate ways to win the game. I need more troops. I'd like to be able to just bring my knight to d5 or b5, but that's going to get captured. Wait a second, if it does get captured, and then you look for tactics, and you play the move anyway. Okay, that's what a lot of strong players will do. So, black plays rook a6, queen to d5 check, king sidesteps, brings in the knight. Again, if you look at the position, you don't have a clear way to win, bring in more pieces or improve pieces that you have, right? His queen's already very powerful in the center of the board, doing all kinds of stuff. His rook is already very powerful. His knight, not so much. So what does he do? Improves the position of the knight, right? Black plays here, and I think, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Yeah, what do you guys think he played here? All right, get a chance to look at that. Knight to d6, and it's a very nice move, basically ignoring the threat on the rook, because if this happens, there's going to be checkmate there. Again, he's looking at these moves of like, this is what I would like to play, but what if I, it seems like you can't, but actually you can as long as you have a follow-up tactic to make it work, which is what happens here. And then we just have rook comes over here. King to f1, simply now defending the rook, bringing the king into the game. And finally, his opponent decided to resign. There's not really much black can do. He's all tied up. And maybe it's good practice if black wouldn't have resigned and would have played, let's just say, a random move like b6. How would you finish off the game here as white? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, probably the simplest and easiest thing to do would be to just trade here. And when the rook recaptures, now you can jump in with the queen. Look at this. You've got a triple fork happening here, and black's position is totally falling apart after something like this. You can take the bishop, you can take the rook, whatever you want. Now it's pretty easy. Okay, so really nice game there by Alekhine. The key feature, I would say, goes all the way back to right here. Okay, this was the moment in the game where black made a questionable decision to kind of block themselves up here, right? The king still wasn't castled. So Alekhine said, okay, how can I take advantage of this in the most powerful way possible? And he probably started with rook e1 check and noticed that, well, bishop e7, I don't really have a good follow-up. I mean, yeah, I could do this, but black's just going to castle and I don't have anything. How can I do it in a different way? Knight to g5, threatening either queen d3 or queen h5. And then we saw how the game finished out, right? So look for those really powerful ways to take advantage of the weaknesses in the position. All right, having said that, let's go ahead and jump to questions from the last episode. So a question from last time from AQ Serify. In this position right here, we looked at how rook e1 was played, and then later in the game, queen h3. And the question was, what about just queen h3 immediately? Because you're threatening the checkmate after you trade here. And on h6, you can sacrifice and open up the king, and that looks pretty good for white. So why not just do it right away, basically? Why waste time going rook e1, right? So here's the deal, and it's a good question. I'm going to give you the complicated answer first, and then I'm going to summarize it into a more simple answer if that one doesn't make sense. But let's go over the complicated answer first. So the complicated reason is on queen h3, black can play h6. And when you take, they're not going to take you back. They're going to play this move e5, unleashing the bishop attacking your queen. Now, you could sidestep that with queen g3, threatening checkmate, but they're going to go knight h5. It's attacking your queen, and it's also defending the checkmate. And now you have to do something like maybe queen g5. Okay, you got to move your queen somewhere. You don't want to lose your bishop, so you have to do something like this. But then they could simply take. The game goes on. It's slightly better for white, but it's not really that good. I mean, it's like half of a pawn advantage for white. Okay. If you play rook e1 first, like in the game, and then they played rook e8, and now you play queen h3, if black tries to do the same thing, you take, they push to unleash, you go queen g3, they play knight h5. This is the same exact thing that we looked at. You now have a new move available to you because these moves have been played. And the move is this queen f3, which keeps the queens on the board rather than trading, which is good when you're trying to attack. And if they take you, you're going to take here, and this is actually a much better position for white. Now, you might be wondering, Nelson, why couldn't you just do queen f3 earlier in that line you showed? Well, let me show you. So going back here, if you play queen h3 right away, h6 takes, knight h5, sorry, e5 first, queen g3, knight h5. If you try to play queen f3 here, black actually has this really nice move, e4, a fork. And you're kind of obligated to take it, otherwise you're just going to lose a piece. But once you take it, they're going to take you, and when you take back, your bishop is undefended, and black actually has a winning position. Okay? That wasn't available. Imagine if our rook was sitting on e1. Black couldn't do this. Okay? So that was the key difference. Okay? Now, that was very complicated, so I'm not expecting that you guys would have followed that. However, here's the simplified answer that I do expect that you could understand this. When you are trying to attack, the more pieces that you have available, the better the outcome is going to be. That's plain and simple. The more pieces that you have available, the better the outcome is going to be. So rook to e1, guess what? That's one more piece that white has available to attack. Right now, it's helping control the e-file, which helps in some of those lines that I just showed you. And then later in this game, we saw how it actually was able to come up and over and help in other ways as well. So again, the more pieces you have before you attack, the better it's going to turn out. So that's what it comes back down to. Queen h3 was just kind of rushing the attack just a little bit, and having that rook on the e-file was a good move to throw in there. Okay? Yeah, it's a good question, but that's basically what the answer is. So I'll see you guys next time for game number 16. It starts on page 93. And don't forget, let me throw this up one more time. Breaking 1500 is coming out in 10 days, July 15th. It's only going to be open for a few days, and you're not going to want to miss that if you're under 1500. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks for that, and I will see you next time. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.